Welcome to the Leaderonomics show. In our hot seat today is Dr Conine, President of TRI Corporation, which designs and delivers business simulations for global organizations. Well seasoned in the world of business, Tom is also an academic and is Professor of Finance at Fairfield University. Let's join Roshan Thiran as he talks to Tom about credibility in business and why finance gives you a seat at the table.
Welcome to the Leaderonomics show. Today I'm with Dr Conine, the founder, partner, and president of TriCorp. Tom, welcome to the show.
It's always a pleasure.
Always pleasure to...
Been too many years.
Yes, we last met I think a couple of years ago.
About seven or eight actually.
When I was at GE and you were the guy who was helping GE transform itself into a great financial a center. Tom, let's start a little bit with your background. How did you were a professor at Fairfield University. And I assume you had a long, illustrious academic career, and also, starting up your own company and making it such a big, large global organization. Let's talk a little bit about how did you start out? What drew you to finance and to the academia world?
Well, when I was at NYU, Roshan, I became involved with a business simulation there called the Stanford Bank Game.
Okay, this was when you were
when I was at NYU in the
Okay.
PhD program,
PhD,
actually.
okay.
And I ran that for a few years and became very interested in simulations, but primarily financial service. I left NYU when I graduated, ended up at the University of Connecticut for a few years, and then ultimately came back to Fairfield University, which very close to where my wife and I grew up in Stratford, Connecticut, and we always wanted to be in that area. So Fairfield was a very logical choice. And one of my first assignments there was to start the Master of Science in Financial Management program. And that was back in around 1981. That led to work being Associate Dean, Director of Research, and a variety of other positions at the university. But by the late 80s, I had effectively given up all kinds of administrative type of work to concentrate on executive education. Probably about 7 or 8 years before we actually first met in Singapore. In around 1995. Now, back in 1978, I had actually taught a summer program for then Manufacturers Hanover. It was fondly called Manny Hanny in the old days. And I actually loved that. And interestingly enough, when I was at NYU, I wasn't really sure if I was going to go into an academic kind of career, possibly more consulting. But that kind of convinced me that I loved education. I had the fortunate opportunity to become involved with GE Crotonville in the early 80s and have been there since approximately 1982, 1983, and a lot of their leadership programs, as well as teaching for their customers all over the world, including here in Malaysia for Petronas and Malaysia Airline Systems, actually. In the middle 80s, I met my first business partner, David Sims, terrific guy, and we came together because of my expertise in finance and his expertise in simulations, but my having worked with simulations years earlier. And it became a very formidable business because bringing those two skills together. In the late 80s, we started doing the advanced finance courses at GE, and that led to all different kinds of opportunities, from courses on growth, courses on risk management. We expanded our business in the early 90s, and today I have a new business partner, Carlo Paratoner, great guy, and we work all over the world. A little bit of history there, 14 of the Dow 30 have been clients of ours over the years. We often teach for our customers, which we consider an honor and a privilege. We still have a very strong relationship with General Electric that goes back now for decades. And our primary vehicle for teaching is experiential type learning, business simulations.
And when you first set up the company, what were some of your challenges that you had?
Probably the biggest challenge for me was that I probably wasn't what one would have considered a great team player at the time.
Okay.
And
You got to explain that.
well, what that means is I was used to working on things on my own, and it became very, very important that one's able to work, obviously, and develop a consensus within a team. I also, in coming out of NYU, probably felt that, if you couldn't put it into an equation, maybe it didn't matter. And you quickly learn that that's not the case. So as I progressed through my career, what I quickly found out is obviously you've got to have certain competency and hard skills, but the soft skills become enormously important. In fact, if anything, early on in one's career, one of my big learnings is that hard skills obviously can get you that first job, but then they kind of taper off, and the importance of soft skills just goes up geometrically. Because at the end of the day, one of our great findings is all businesses is people dealing with people. That's all it is at the end of the day.
We're going to talk a little bit more about your business and how you scaled it to become this global brand. But we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll be right back with Tom Conine here on the Leaderonomics Show. Welcome back to the Leaderonomics Show. I'm with Tom Conine, the founder and president of one of the biggest financial simulation companies in the world, TriCorp. Tom, Tri was a very, it was really a bunch of, you and David essentially who started the company, but you've taken it up to become such a huge company. Like you said, a huge portion of the Dow 30 use you guys. How did you scale Tri? What were some of the challenges, and what were some of the issues that you had along the way?
Well, I certainly don't know if we're the biggest, but I'd like to think that we're the best. And in fact, our strategy has never to really be the biggest, but amongst the best and be top quality for our customers, Roshan. And if I look back at the growth that we've been able to have, and we've been very lucky, very fortuitous, and market conditions have changed, and we've been able to continue to grow, it comes back to my comment before about the people, and most of our growth is through our network. We're not out there typically marketing, advertising ourselves. Of course we do a little bit of that, but what you would find is that if you looked at all of our clients today, and we have roughly 25 clients around the world of all different sizes, literally all different industries, all different geographies, all over the world.
And these are 25 big clients like Dell and GE.
Some of them are very big. Dell's, GE's of the world, the Microsofts of the world, very large clients, and then some are much smaller. Some of our business might only be one day a year with a client. Some goes into, of course, into months, and it varies significantly. But if you looked at that development, it's all through the network that we developed it, and a lot of that, of course, does go back to the relationships with GE. We deal at very senior levels within organizations, CEO levels, CFO levels, and that's our network that we deal with. And
but how do you get that credibility that CEOs, CFOs would come to you and look for you for some of their challenges?
Well, the credibility comes from making sure that whatever we're doing, it is aligned absolutely to what their needs are and their strategy happens to be. And if you don't have that alignment, it'll be a very short-term relationship. Now, like everybody, we've had our disasters along the way, but I think the vast majority of the time, we've been able to meet whatever those needs are. We also make absolutely sure that we have a degree of customization. And that, for us, that comes not so much from designing things that exactly mimic the business of our client, but that does take people a little out of the box, but that reasonably reflects their reality and issues that they are confronted with in their daily operations. So it's not unusual when we sit down with a client, we'll ask them, well, what are 3 or 4 very relevant things to you right now, or 3 or 4 things that you think will be relevant that you want to make sure that we reinforce within our programs, within our simulations.
You know, one of the things is, companies like GE, where finance is a huge part of the business, that every single employee needs to understand it, know it, and live it to some extent. But many other companies don't have that similar sort of, they don't sort of value the importance of finance or business acumen in organizations. What advice would you give CEOs if you could advise them?
Well, they're going to quickly learn that in today's world in particular, if you don't have an understanding of finance and accounting, I mean, look, essentially it's the language of business. and you're not going to have the seat at the table. And in fact, if you look at many COOs today in the United States, I can speak intelligently about this in the US, not necessarily outside the US, you would find that the vast majority of COOs today have come out of the finance ranks because they have that operational type experience, they have that well-roundedness, they understand the language of business, and they also understand that primarily we are in business for our shareholders, but we have to have a balanced need, of course, for all the stakeholders that are in a business on a sustainable type basis.
But how do you get your employees to embrace it? Because finance is some people just say, I'm going to stay away from finance.
Well, when we're teaching it, we have to have a passion for it. We have to have a love for it.
So it starts with the teacher.
And it starts with us as the teachers. And if we can't convey that, then we're not doing our job. All of our people have to be excited about what they are doing. Now, our team, the average age of our employees is about 56 or 57 years old. People with significant business experience, and they bring a love to the game that I've never seen elsewhere. They're doing it not for necessarily monetary reward. They're doing it because they want to give back, they want to help, and they want to educate, in particular, younger people.
We're going to take a quick break, but one quick question before we do that. What drove your love for finance?
I started out in finance probably because of my grandfather, actually, and because of his interest in the stock market. If I went way back in time, and years ago, back in the 1960s, he had given me $500 to go and invest in the stock market.
That would have been
and
quite a bit of money.
I found it probably was at that time, and I found that to be a very interesting challenge. I think I hit a down market and probably lost 50% of it within a few weeks because I had to, run and jump right in just like any young person. And I quickly learned that's not the way to go. That you have to have a long-term focus on it. But that's where I got interested in it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break.
Initial investment.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with the Thinkonomics challenge for Tom Conine. We're right here on the Leaderonomics show. Welcome back. We are now at the Thinkonomics segment. Tom, we're going to put you through a grueling test of how quick you are to answer a couple of questions. You got 30 seconds.
30 seconds to answer the question. Okay.
I'm going to give you the first question. Would you clone yourself?
Would I clone myself? Maybe to some degree, but not certainly to 100%, because I'm sure there's some flaws there. I'd probably learn from those flaws.
Would you clone yourself to keep the Tom Conine?
Well, I'd like to think that my kids have certain characteristics that have been cloned, the good side of things.
All right, that's good. All right, here's a second question. What are your thoughts on bribery?
Awful, absolutely awful.
Meaning?
We have a common expression in Tribe that we teach, and it's about meeting commitments, which is a central theme of everything that we do. And our expression is very simple. Certainly meet your commitments, but you have to do it in a totally 100% ethical way. There is no second chance, and the expression that we use is you would always miss before you would mislead. And any form of bribery, always miss before you mislead. And the reason you miss before you mislead, Roshan, is you will come back and get a chance to play a second day.
Whereas if you mislead?
If you mislead, there's no second chance, and there never should be.
Yep, fantastic. Okay, third question. What are the most important ingredients for you to establish a strong relationship?
Probably the most important one is some element of diversity with whomever I'm dealing with. I do like divergent opinion. I do like a strong debate. I do like to get all arguments, pro and con, out on the table. But once that relationship starts existing, certainly there's got to be trust in that relationship. I'm not a big one on giving a lot of detailed instructions. I expect that people in our organization certainly kind of know the right thing to do.
Okay, we still got some more. I'll go to the final question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you agree with the proverb, it takes money to make money?
Well, there's an old expression in the commodity market, Roshan, that if you want to end up with 2 million, start with 5 million.
or if you want to.
In other words, because you will lose.
The one I know in aviation is if you want to be a millionaire, be a billionaire.
Be
buy
a billionaire
an
first. That's exactly correct. Certainly, having money does certainly help because it gives you the chance to make mistakes. And in a world where bankruptcy can exist, obviously having that money behind you can certainly help.
Yeah, I want to ask you a couple of questions. You interesting because you started with a kind of an academic background, but in the same time you're one of the few academicians who've successfully built a company that has scaled to somewhat of a global presence to some extent. If somebody else is looking and say, I want to be like Tom Conine, I'm just graduating from the university and I'm like, look, I want to be just like this guy. What kind of advice would you give a person like that?
Well, for any young person coming along, if they're in an undergraduate school, the best advice I think I could give would be to get the most holistic type of education you probably could. Probably not in a business school, actually. Probably more in a liberal arts environment. And learn, what I would challenge people to do is learn how to think logically, think critically on their feet. Now, what I mean by helping them to think logically, how would they identify, measure, analyze, and mitigate different real-world situations that they'll have to deal with.
So you'd encourage them to have a good finance sort of
Well, I would get a good, strong liberal arts education because no one knows where they're going to end up. Nearly everyone that I've ever met in any kind of career probably started out and ended up 5 years, 10 years later, totally opposite of what they expected to do. There's always going to be, Roshan, the individual that is going to decide that they're going to be a brain surgeon at the age of 4, and sure enough, at 60, they're a brain surgeon. But for most people, you switch 100 times in your career. So learning how to be flexible,
okay to do that, huh?
It's absolutely okay. It makes for a very well-rounded individual, and it's the way of the corporate world today. Companies don't owe you anything except to give you the proper skills to do your job the best you possibly can.
Okay, final question. If you were to address a group of CEOs, what advice would you give them?
If I addressed a group of CEOs, I would always want to make sure that they understood that expression that I used before, that at the end of the day, all businesses is people dealing with people, and that they have to understand that. You get to the top and it's kind of easy to forget that. And I would also say to them, say thank you to people. Okay, thank yous go a long way. It may not be a monetary reward, but hearing a thank you is a very positive thing and motivation for people. And always treat people with respect and dignity. That's what I would tell them.
Well,
and I've mentioned that on numerous occasions to different senior executives that I know.
Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure having you on our show.
Roshan, as always, buddy. It's great to see you again.
We've been talking to Tom Conine here on the Leaderonomics show.